focus? I hope so. So, hi there. My name is Daniel and I'm a video and film creator for almost 20 years now. Normally I do client stuff like image videos, music videos, corporate videos, you name it. But today I'd like to try something new. Dehancer reached out to me and asked if I could do a review and overview about their Dehancer plugin for Davinci Resolve. And my first thoughts were, well, there are so many videos already out there. What can I add to the soup? What can I bring to the party? But then I thought, maybe this is just the right challenge to begin 2026 with. And so here I am. Today I'd like to show you how my workflow with the Davinci Resolve Dehancer plugin is, what I like to do with RedRaw footage like this one right now, which is coming from the Nikon ZR paired with the Mantis anamorphic lens. But I also have native red cameras like the Komodo X and the Komodo. And I'd like to show you what I do with the footage, how my workflow is, what I like about the Dehancer plugin, how it can enrich your footage actually. So I would say let's jump into Davinci Resolve and I hope you enjoy the ride with me. Thanks. Okay, let's jump into Davinci Resolve. I've set up a small timeline here with some footage from my Komodo X and the Nikon ZR. Everything was shot in RedRaw, but before we start, we have to check our project settings. Most importantly, our color management settings. What you want to do is change the timeline color space to Davinci Wide Gamut Intermediate and change the output color space to whatever is suited to you. In my case, it's Rec 709. I guess this is the case for most of you out there. So this has to be checked first. Okay, so let's jump right into the color panel. We start with a clip shot on the Nikon ZR in RedRaw NE. And the first thing that we want to do is bring this footage into Rec 709. Therefore, I like to work with the node tree provided by Darren Mostyn. I fully recommend checking out his YouTube channel, a great colorist. I'll leave a link down in the description. And once we bring in this node tree, don't wonder, there will be several nodes in there, but I loved working with it even if I only use just a few nodes. You can see here there's a lot of stuff going on, but as I said, we will only use in this case just a few nodes, but to keep things organized, I love working with this structure and it's always my starting point. What I like to do is changing the output node in here. Of course, you can save this one as a preset for yourself, but to show you how things are different from the original node tree, I started with the exact node tree provided by Darren. What I like to do is I disable the CST in the end and I bring in a new node. Of course, we have to define the input, which is red, white, gamut RGB and red lock. Where is it? Here, red lock 3G10. And now we define the input, transform to Davinci Wide Gamut and Davinci Intermediate. And on the new node we just made, and as you can see, I disabled the CST at the end and I bring in a DCTL on this last node, and therefore I like to work with OpenDRT. There are other DCTLs out there, but in this case we work with OpenDRT, and as you can see, once we bring this in, we have a nice balanced Rec 709 image. Of course, it's always a good idea to balance the footage, check the white balance and so on. In this case, the white balance looks quite on point, but what I like to do is bring in a little bit of contrast, so I'm pushing the highlights a bit and bring down the shadows just a bit. And yes, I'm here working on a micro panel, so I'm just turning the wheels. And what you can do then to work with the Dehancer, I make 3 new nodes, and we start with the first node and bring on the Dehancer plugin. And as you can see right on the start, we have some kind of filmic look, but we of course want to start with a clean plate. So the first thing we want to do is go into the Dehancer plugin, scroll down to the bottom, and we want to disable all tools. And then we come back to the top where we can define our input source, which is in this case Davinci Resolve Wide Gamut Intermediate. And then we are going on directly with the heart and soul of the Dehancer plugin, which is of course the film preset emulation selection. And there, as you can see, we have several different film profiles. We have the famous Kodak Vision ones in here. Let's try the 250D and enable it. As you can see, we directly have an impact, and the 500T is a little bit more on the warmer side. And there's also one of my favorites, the Kodak X 100. As you can see, we already have quite a strong look on here. And the next thing you want to do, of course, is print emulation. I like to do this next step on a new node. I will explain in a few seconds why I'm doing this way. So we define our input, and then we go directly to the print emulation. We want to print on the Kodak 2383. Let's enable it and go on with the analog range limiter. And what we did not do on the first node is something like exposure compensation or temperature compensation. You can do those things directly inside the Dehancer plugin. Of course, when shooting in RAW, you can do this balancing with the Dehancer plugin on in your RAW settings, as you can see on the left hand side down here. And you can also check your balance on the balance node, of course, but you also have the controls right directly here in the Dehancer. And now we're back on the first Dehancer node, and what I like to do here is bring in the film developer and film compression tools. So film negative has a different behavior than the digital camera world when it comes to highlight clipping. And this is what film compression is for. When you look here on the left side, the window light, and as I turn the film compression on and off, you see a different behavior in the highlights. Maybe you can say a smoother roll off. You can also see it in the scopes as well. So if you have highlights in your picture, the film compression helps sending that smooth highlight roll off from the film negative. Okay, so the next thing we have is the film developer tool, and from my side, as I already said, the footage always is a bit too desaturated for my personal taste. So what I like to do is I bring up the color boost. So it's always a good idea to use the tools within Dehancer. And now we come to the point. One of the main reasons that I like to split the Dehancer up into 3 single nodes is because we can use the total impact dialer and dial things directly to our personal taste. So the main reason to split things up is to have a little bit more control over all the single aspects that the Dehancer has to offer. So once we dial in our total impact to our personal taste, maybe around 80% or something, we then can move on to the last node, and we will bring in the Dehancer plugin one more time. as we did on the last two ones, we disable our tools, we set in our source, and now we jump directly to the effects. First we have the film grain, which in my opinion always helps to sell the filmic analog look. This is something I always use when I'm using the Dehancer plugin, and the grain inside the Dehancer plugin is pretty nice. You can select from different profiles. I like the 65mm, and I don't know if you can see it, but you have a fine, nice grain, and when you're turning things on and off, you can see directly an impact on your footage. The next thing we want to enable is bloom. So bloom emulates the combined effect of light dispersion on contrasty image areas. I like to turn this one on, and that gives a nice little touch to the final image. Then we also have the film damage and film breath and gate weave, and also an overscan effect. I rarely use those because for my taste the grain, bloom and sometimes the halation effect has the most and beautiful impact on an analog look. And as you can see here, dialing in the total impact of just these effects also is a great way to tune the final look. Once you dialed in your Dehancer look, what you might want to do is come back to the balance node once again with the Dehancer effect active, and you might want to have a final check for your balance and exposure. Sometimes it's, in my opinion, necessary to correct this a bit, and in the end what I also would like to recommend is adding a fourth node behind the Dehancer. And what I like to do here is I switch to the lock wheels and I just lift the lock shadow a little bit, just a little bit. As you can see here on my shoulder, on the shirt, we just lifting the shadows a bit, which helps, in my opinion, also sell the effect. So once you've done that, we can see here the before lock image and the after image, and here we can see turning off all the Dehancer nodes. As we split it up into 3 nodes, we'll select all 3, and when we turn these off, you can see the Rec 709 image coming out of OpenDRT, and here we have the Dehancer look. Looks pretty good in my opinion. Okay, so let's take a look at one more example. We have my daughter here on the beach, and we bring in the Mostyn notary once again. We disable the CST in the end, and we bring in one new node, and on this node, as we did before, we place the DCTL, bring in OpenDRT, and of course we have to also define our input, which is in this case also red, white, gamut, and red lock. Where is it? There we have it. This is footage from the Komodo X, and what you can notice here also in the scopes and of course in the image, it's way too bright. It's not clipped, but it's too bright. So what I like to do here is bring down in the RAW settings the ISO and correct the color temperature with the slider, warm things a bit up, and from this point, yes, this looks pretty good in my opinion. We have a good starting point, and what I really love about this image, you can see also in the scopes, we have a lot of detail in the sky. The sky is not plain white, you can also still see the clouds, pretty good. So we can bring in a new node, and then I'd like to show you how we can work with the Dehancer plugin on a single node. We bring in the plugin, we disable all the tools to have a clean starting point, and we define our input. What I didn't show you on the first example is also a good way to work with the Dehancer plugin when you don't want to use the intermediate format. As you can see here in the bottom, we have in the source list also the selection choose camera, and once you choose this one you get a new menu item where you can select your vendor. In my case, oh no, it's not Nikon, it's as I said Red and then the Komodo X, and we have the IPP2 color workflow, and what you can see now is that we have a damaged image. This is because we already have a conversion to Rec 709 in the end with the OpenDRT. Once we disable the DCTL, we come back to the nice and clean Rec 709 image, and you can also choose this way and then work down your way through all the settings in the Dehancer. I like to stay with the intermediate format and bring in OpenDRT once again, and then we can work with the clean Rec 709 image. So the first thing we want to do, as we did before, is choose our favorite film emulation. In this example we might want to try the Kodak Gold 200, and then I like to enable the film developer and film compression. We already saw directly the impact on the sky once we enabled it, and we also like to enable the expand option. Then we bring in our print profile, the Kodak 2383 in this case, and from here on we have we already have a nice image, but as I said before, you can see before and after, and as I said before, we always have at least in my opinion, a bit desaturated image. So what I like to do is bring in the color boost a bit, boost the color, and maybe we can also play a bit with the contrast in here. And maybe let's try a different profile just to show you. You can switch to profiles directly and see the impact. The Kodak Vision 250D is a nice profile with some cooler tones in the shadows, and we can use the expand tool, look at the scopes here to move our black point, and of course we can do the same in here when we're going to the white point. So we don't want the highlights to be clipped, but we can brighten things a little bit up, and from here on we have a good looking image in my opinion. What I like to show you here as well is the option color head. We didn't use this one in the example before, but when you use this one I like to exaggerate things here a bit. So you have a yellow blue slider and the magenta green slider, and you can see when I move things how the image changes. So what I like to do is just dial in a bit. It's, from my perspective, a creative work, so there's nothing wrong, nothing right. Of course you should not damage your image. Always check your scopes, and you can also use the shadow tone a bit, so we have some warmer shadows which are lifted, and let's see it before, after. Okay, from here on we can enable the effect film grain as we did before. Let's go with the 65mm preset and let's check the amount. From here on we can enable the halation and also the bloom effect, where you have contrast the edges with bright highlights. You always can see the bloom effect. In this case, sometimes it can be helpful to use the mask mode. I think it's hard to tell for you on YouTube. I even can't see the red lines here. Sometimes switching the profile helps a bit, and there are of course maybe better examples to show you the mask mode, but turning things on and off always gives you directly feedback on how the effect impacts the footage. As I said before, film damage, film breath and gate weave effects I seldom use. Of course, if you think it helps to improve your footage in some way, you can try them out. The important thing here to understand, in my opinion, is that all the things we are doing here are creative work, so try them out and maybe you like them. So what I like about Dehancer, besides the nice profiles and looks, is the grain, and I can't repeat it often enough. It really helps selling this footage. What I forgot to mention in the first example is that we have a quality option at the bottom of the Dehancer plugin. And of course, you always want the best results, so I recommend set this to high, at least before you render the project. In my case, and for this video, I left every setting or every Dehancer plugin on the normal setting. From what I saw is that when you switch to the high quality setting, you get a much more detailed look when it comes to the grain. The normal setting is also good. It's not that it's bad, but when you render out and you are looking for the highest quality, you always want to set it to high. Okay, so let's move on to the last example. Here we have footage from the Nikon ZR in RedRaw NE, shot in 4K with 100 frames per second. And what I like to show you here is that I don't always build the look from scratch. The great thing about the RedRaw footage, or when you have footage from nearly the same cameras, is that you can copy and paste looks. In my case, I just gripped this one from the Komodo X we just built with the middle mouse click, and here you can see we already have quite a good image. What I like to do sometimes is changing the film profile and tweaking the color boost in this case. Despite the other two examples, this one is a little bit too saturated for my taste, and then I like to switch to the Komodo X 100 profile, and look what we have here. It's a pretty neat and nice image and looks really good. What I always recommend to check as well as, of course, I can't repeat it often enough, are your scopes. Always look at these, and as you can see here, turning on and off the effect really changes how the footage looks and feels. And all the rest we set on the scene before is untouched for this example, and I'll leave it as it is. Sometimes you might want to check your film compression or your expand settings, depending on how contrasty your image or your scenery is. In this case, it looks fine to my eye. You can, if you want, tweak the impact slider a bit. I told you at the beginning the advantages when splitting the Dehancer into several nodes, but you can do it as you like. What I like to do here at last step, bring in one more node as we did before, and as you remember, on this node I'd like to bring up the lock wheels and push the shadows. So as I told you before, this sometimes helps, in my opinion, changing the image which is already manipulated by the Dehancer afterwards and bring up the shadows a bit. Okay, so this was my overview of the Dehancer plugin for Davinci Resolve. I showed you different ways on how I like to use the plugin. In my opinion, this plugin really helps when you're looking for some nice filmic looks. Apropos filmic looks, as I told you, I want to show you something different in this video as well. And what is coming next by the Dehancer team is a Dehancer desktop version. As you can see here, this one is for photos. It will read your JPEGs and RAWs. And while we have all the nice manipulating settings we already saw on the Resolve plugin on the right hand side, we have something different here on the left hand side, which I really love. It's a preset gallery, and I love preset galleries because sometimes it helps speed up the process, have a good starting point, and you get directly an idea on how your footage, how your photo will look like. In this example, I like to select a preset to just give you an idea on how things change. Let's see, we have something like a Kodak look. We have the Kodak Vision 200T here, and you can just click on it, and once you click, you dial in all the settings from where you now can tweak your footage. So you have a before and after, and you get directly the look out of your preset gallery, which I really like. I wish Resolve had something like this. Okay, we continue with another photo I shot back in the days in Kyoto, and we have a nice picture on the street in the Geisha district, and we can select directly a preset here, and I really love this one. It has a great impact on the photo. You can see the shadows are lifted with a light red tint, so you actually have the same settings like you have in Davinci Resolve. You can tweak all those settings to your likes. What I really love about the desktop version is that you are able to select from a bunch of presets, and therefore you have always a good starting point. As you can see here in the desktop version, you have a small histogram underneath the photo, which helps quite a lot when tweaking highlights and shadows. But from my perspective, it's a good starting point, starting with a preset and tweaking on from there. Okay, this is the Dehancer desktop version. Overall, you have, as I said, the same controls. I really love the preset selection, would love to see that within Davinci Resolve sometimes. For this moment, I think we are good to go. If you are interested in a single video about the Dehancer desktop version, let me know in the comments. And thanks for watching. So yes, that was my salt and pepper to the Davinci Resolve and Dehancer soup. I hope you enjoyed it. I did, although I found it quite challenging to be in front of the camera. Normally I stand on the other side, and this is more convenient for me, I have to admit. So to all of you guys who are standing in front of the camera every day, thumbs up. You're doing a good job. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you anytime soon. Bye.